MMA training. And I think it's the greatest thing because it shows you and your students what really works. Like they're learning all these techniques.
Welcome to the Satori Lifestyle Satori Masters podcast, the ultimate resource for ambitious, hardworking school owners that want to get their business and their life to the next level. My name is Dave Kovar. I'm a lifetime martial artist, business owner, speaker, and author. My goal is to empower listeners with the knowledge and the tools they need to break through barriers and really get their business and their life to the next level. Thanks for watching and enjoy. Welcome to the Satori Lifestyle Satori Masters podcast. I'm your host, Dave Kovar, and with me today is my good friend, John Hackleman, the Pitmaster. How are you, sir?
Fantastic.
All right, good to see you, man. It seems like we used to bump into each other a lot more often. Things have changed. I saw you about a year ago at an event, but we don't run into each other as much.
No, yeah, I think one thing was the Super Show. They don't do
Yep.
that anymore. I don't go to as many fights anymore. I don't know. Maybe we're both getting older and just being more homebodies.
That could be it as well. All right. Well, hey, man. So if those of you who don't know, you probably don't need introduction. John Hackleman has been in the game forever. He's an amazing martial artist. He's also well known for being the coach of several UFC greats, including Chuck Liddell and Glover Teixeira. And what's interesting about Mr. Hackleman is that he he is, of course, an MMA. He's considered one of the, an amazing MMA coach, but he also teaches kids martial arts and everywhere in between. So I thought would be interesting for everybody to do is first off, kind of, if someone doesn't know you, kind of tell us your story. I know you grew up in Hawaii. Kind of give us your martial arts history a little bit.
Uh, I started like 90+% of martial arts guys because I was being bullied. Um, Went to my mom. I was like 9 years old, and she, they don't know women. I mean, women in particular, but adults aren't as keen on that. They're too busy trying to support us and go to work and stuff. And so I looked in the yellow pages at 9 years old, and I saw this really cute, cool logo. So I called the number, got the address, and the next day after school, I went and caught the bus to that place, and I walked in. It's tiny. It was like 500 square feet, maybe.
Okay. Okay.
Tiny. Heavy bag and a makiwara. And then I went into a little office, and the guy was sitting there, big local Hawaiian guy. And I told him what I wanted. All right, go out there, go train out there. And there was some guys training, and I went out and I started training. And I remember thinking, that was like 1970, and I remember thinking, this is it. This is from me the rest of my life. This feeling I have right now, I'm never going to leave. It's never left me. That feeling's never left me. And I started training, and then there were some classes, and next thing you know, I'm a karate guy. And
That's crazy. Now, at this, how did you pay for tuition? Did your mom, how long until your mom found out about it?
it was weird. It was weird. Godin, his name is Walter Godin.
Sure.
Find out later, he was making his money doing criminal activity, and the gym was just something he did for fun. And I think he told me it was like $5, and then he never charged again. I think I paid $5 for the first month or something, and he never asked anybody for money. That's not how he made his money. It was a front, but I didn't know that then. I was a kid, but there was no money involved. And in Hawaii, it's kind of weird, and it's kind of hard for a lot of martial arts instructors there because money is frowned upon if you're a martial arts instructor. They think you're like selling out if you charge money. It's like, hey, why you money? That's martial arts. You're supposed to teach martial arts. You shouldn't charge people. And a lot of them don't. And most martial arts schools in Hawaii are in rec centers or at parks or in like junior high school cafeterias, like the school system rents them out to people. Very few schools are like they are here. Most of them, like I said, they're in rec centers. Like our system started in Palama Settlement, which was a recreation center in a part of Honolulu. So I didn't pay anything.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's a great story. I love it. And
And I
then
was with him from 1970 to 2001 when he passed away. He was you know, my only instructor, my main instructor, my mentor, which is kind of scary to think about because you think about all the things he's done and he's been through and how much prison time he has. And to think that was my number one mentor growing up. And I
but
remember even as a kid, I remember as a kid, teenager, thinking, I want to be just like him in the way I deal with people and the way I talk to people and the way I carry myself and my confidence. But I want to be more like my dad who has a really strict moral compass. And I don't want to be a criminal guy, but I want to be tough like him, but not a criminal. So I kind of have my dad over here, you know, and then my dad was a very strict and very, very moral guy. And then I wanted to be like Godin, who wasn't, but he was also tough as nails. So I kind
it's
of
very cool. It's cool that you
good
were able
cop,
to.
bad cop.
Yeah, it was cool that you're able to kind of see that at a young age. It's interesting because my original instructor, who I still have a relationship, his name is Bruce Chucknick, and it was I'm not comparing with Godin because he's no criminal at all. But one of the some of the stuff that I remember going on in the school at the time, this was the early '70s, is stuff you just wouldn't do now. And I remember thinking, I learned so much from him, but I remember if I ever have a school, I'm not going to do that at my school. I
Yeah.
learned successfully what not to do in a lot of cases. Now I learned a ton of good stuff from him, and he's a great guy, but also some of the business practices. Like to this day, I keep track of people's names and numbers on my calendar. I just scribble it on my desk, and that's something I learned from him. Not a good idea, but it's something I haven't been able to break. But okay, so eventually you weren't looking at karate and martial arts as a career. You're in the military, and then you became a nurse. And how did you actually go from transition from that? And of course, you had a very successful kickboxing career yourself. How did you transition from that to opening up? And I know you had, of course, the pit that on your property that was this, like, it's to this day, it's a legend, right? People hear the stories about it. How did you go from
Yeah.
there to being a successful martial arts school operator?
Um, I I always did it. It was always in my backyard, and I opened my backyard gym because I was still fighting, but I couldn't raise kids as a kickboxer back in the day. I was a world champion, and I barely made anything kickboxing. There was no money back then. Um, so I realized real quick, having three kids, I had to keep, working. So I went to school and became a registered nurse, but I also still fought for quite a while after I became a registered nurse. So that gym in my backyard became the pit. And people, next thing I know, my friends wanted to train. Hey, you got a backyard gym? I want to train there. Next thing I know, there's like pit jackets, pit tattoos, pit everything. And it's like, it became kind of a cultish, well-known gym and and then one day a good friend of mine said you should just do the martial arts. You don't need to be a nurse anymore, man. You're getting kind of a reputation of teaching. And I said, "Nah, I could never make a living doing it." And he talked me into it. It was actually a good friend of mine, and he talked me into it. And I just went looked around, found a place in town, um, and next thing I know, within 3 months, I was in the black, and I thought,
Crazy.
oh shit. So I quit nursing, and I've been doing that since 2001.
That's crazy. And tell me, I mean, I've personally heard the story a few times, but right about that time, when did I love the story about how you became Chuck Liddell became your student. How he came over, his instructor sent him over to challenge you or something like that. Kind of walk
Yeah.
us through that story because that's a great story.
He actually invited me to come to his dojo. He had a really traditional dojo in our neighboring town, San Luis Obispo. And he called me and said he didn't appreciate, what I was doing. Gym was still in my backyard, and we were getting the reputation. Everybody was walking around with pit clothes and pit tattoos, and we were even in the news and stuff. And he said he didn't like that because he thought it wasn't good for the martial arts part. And, he didn't like sport martial arts, and he thought his system um, could easily beat a sport guy. And I said, well, so I said, why don't we find out? How about you and me? Let's get in a mat and let's just go and see who wins. And let's have no rules. So you can do whatever you want and let's see who will win. He goes, okay, why don't you come to my dojo this weekend and we'll see. And I was like, all right. So I told my dad, and my dad was like, yeah, that sounds interesting. So my dad, who lived with me by then, he retired and he moved out here from Hawaii, and he was helping me with the kids and stuff. So he lived here at my house. So we drove down there on a Friday, and I walked into his dojo, really nice, fancy Japanese. It was a Japanese system. Um, and I walked into his office, and he said he had a injury, so he couldn't do it today, but one of his students will take his place. And he pointed, and it was Chuck. And Chuck was warming up on the mat. And I remember I turned to my dad. I go, who the fuck has a mohawk? Who has a mohawk? He had a mohawk, Chuck. So, so I went out. I got introduced to Chuck by his sensei, and he was wearing a gi, with his black belt. And we went, we just started going, and it went back and forth, and I probably got the better of him. But after we were done, I was in the changing room, and I was changing, and he came in and he said, "Hey, will you teach me how to really fight?" And I said, "Yeah, here's my card." And driving home, I remember telling my dad, he's never going to call me. But the next day, he called me, and he came over and he trained with me from that next day till forever. And now he became my student that day.
What a great story. And I think I've heard him mention the fact that what him made him so appreciative of you is after like the first day he came over on a moped or something and it was
Oh,
raining and you gave him your truck to take home and just bring it back tomorrow. Or is that the story? How's that story
yeah,
go?
we're done. We got done training. We trained that day, and the training was in my backyard. And I happened to be off work that day. I was working as a nurse, and it was pouring rain. And he had a Honda, like 125, or one of those little Honda. It wasn't a moped, but it was one of the little motor. It was a little motorcycle. Um, and it was pouring rain. He started getting on the bike. I said, bro, you can't ride back. And it was like a 20-minute, 30-minute drive back to slow San Luis Obispo. So I said, you can't ride that. Take my truck, and you're going to come back and train tomorrow morning, right? He goes, yeah. I said, why don't you just take my truck home? He goes, no, I just met him. I just had met him the night before. He's like, you're gonna let me take your, are you sure? I go, yeah, I'll see you tomorrow. And yeah,
What?
that was our relationship, because we were never really friends. Like I wouldn't go hanging out with him. We went to dinner, we went to lunch, we did holidays together. We were family. Like real quick, we became family, but we weren't buddies. It was more of a sensei
Mhm.
student relationship. And that's the way it's always been. I love him, and I think he loves me, but we're family, and we have been since 1991.
That's crazy.
That was great.
Yeah.
1991, yeah.
Yeah, well,
91 or 92.
what a great story, man. And so, all right, you open up your school, early 2000s, your commercial school. You're in the black pretty quickly.
Yeah.
How did you, and I know you don't have a fight team as much. I know you were gracious enough. I don't know if you remember, probably 18 years ago or something, I brought some guys down and you were gracious enough to let them train with your team, but you were still managing, the fight team and running, the bit. First off, how did you, if somebody, by the way, if somebody wanted to have a fight team, what would your advice be to them? Do it, don't do it, turn and run. What in general would you tell them?
No, I think it's a great thing. It's a great if you love MMA. In fact, I'm starting an MMA program for Kempo guys. So they put me in charge of the Kempo MMA, and
All right.
it's called Kempo MMA, the Pit Method. And because I think everybody that loves the sport of MMA or even kickball, whatever it is, I think having your school as your main, like I'd give it a 97% thing. I would say 97% of what I do, and even back then, was running in the gym, running the school, having it being a traditional martial arts instructor. And then 3% is my hobby, which is MMA training or, sport fighting. And I think it's the greatest thing because it shows you and your students what really works. Like they're learning all these techniques, right? And if they don't see it working back in the old days, they saw it working in the street, right? I mean, you practice the stuff. A street fight or a schoolyard fight wasn't a big deal. Today it is, and
Right.
I don't recommend anybody go practice these things out on the street anymore. I used to, but I don't
It's so
anymore.
funny. It was a different age because back in the 70s, because I was a Kempo guy, right? And that was
Yeah.
kind of what you did. The guys that trained, I was a little kid, so I was kind of like the mascot. So I wasn't on the, what on the abused end of this, but the deal was whatever you learned in class that day, you went out to the bars and tried that night, and it was,
Goodine was big at that. Big Goodine was very, very big on that. Um, I think, I mean, he ended up in prison half a dozen times, but the MMA thing is like the perfect testing grounds. Like I could teaching Chuck something, and some of the guys would stick around, like the students, even the kids and their parents, and they would see, this technique that we're doing over and over, and then they'd watch the fights that weekend on pay-per-view or something and see that same technique that they're learning in the dojo in our school. They're seeing, guys using it in real for real, and it's really working. So it gave them confidence, I think, in their system. I think that's one reason having a team, if you're a traditional martial artist, is great. It's a great experience. It's not for everyone.
right.
I think it's a great experience.
And then also, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it would probably encourage to kind of run that separately. In other words, you don't want your fighters beating your students up. Is there any guidelines someone would have for that?
Yeah, I separated the two.
Okay.
The fighters are trained at noon, and I wanted them out, get the fuck out of here by the time my real students come in, or my paying students, or whatever.
Right.
I don't want their shirtless, bloody, fuck it, yelling and shit. The fight team has always been separate. But then sometimes, like if Chuck missed a practice or one of my guys couldn't come for whatever reason, I would let them come to the evening class and train with the traditional guys because it really wasn't that much different in practice. Like I don't do katas, I don't do taiokas, I don't do tricks, I don't do punch tricks, I don't do grab arts, I don't do anything choreographed in my traditional class that I don't do in my fight team. It's just run differently. They wear gi, and I run it a little differently in the way it's starting from the beginning till the bow out. It's a little different, but it's more similar than it is different,
Right. So
and
you
it
could,
always has been since I opened in 2001. There's not really that much difference. So if a fighter misses practice, I'll let him come in and train with the class. And if one of my guys in class wanted to get an extra day in sparring and they were good enough, like they were one of my higher belts, I'd let them train with the team that day.
got it.
But I didn't want the two mixing the fight team and with my family gym.
Got it. So
And a
one of
lot
the
of that had
things
to do with the kids too.
I understood completely. One of the things that I remember when going and I trained one evening in, like, I don't know, your adult class, and this would have been the same time I brought guys down to go work with the team training, is how incredibly intense it was physically. And both you and I think we're the same age. I'm 65. How old are you?
65.
Yeah, yeah. So we both, all humility aside, are probably pretty good shape for our age,
Hmm.
and both of that, it's been an important aspect of my training in martial arts is my fitness, and I know it is for you. But I would love for you, as a guy that's been so experienced in in training fighters to for you to kind of share what you feel like the connection between being really fit, the benefit of being really fit, and then first, let's say for self-defense, forget about being in the ring. Why is fitness such
Yeah.
an important aspect of martial arts in your opinion?
Because even back then and now even more, because I'm, OAF, right? Old as you know what.
Yes, yes.
Um, it always boggles my mind. My trainer, because my fight team, my regular class has always pushed conditioning. Blackjack and 8 counts, and I mean stuff that's like crazy. When the first season that I coached Ultimate Fighter, I did 2 seasons on Ultimate Fighter, and I did some of my workouts that I do with my regular students. And I had one of the Ultimate Fighter contestants puked during one of the workouts. So we have intense workouts because it's one of the four tenets of martial arts, and that is it's striking, wrestling, jujitsu, and physical conditioning. And all four are equal. And if you leave any of them out, you're not a martial artist, you're a partial artist. You have to have all four of those. And it always boggles my mind. Like people go, well, I'm not trying to be a fighter. I'm not trying to be on a fight team. I was like, what if someone jumps you? Why would a guy that's fighting for a sport, trying to make some money or whatever reason, but it's a sport, why is his conditioning, why does he condition himself more than someone that professes to want to protect their family? I mean, you should be training so hard to protect yourself and your family that you should be training harder than a sport guy. I mean, he's just trying to win a medal or some money. You want to protect your family. Training hard should be, I mean, that should be the number one thing on your mind.
Well, it's like the quote from Vince Lombardi: "Poor endurance makes cowards of us all." Right? And it's
Yeah.
and what a story that I'll share when I'm talking about this very thing with my students. They'll say, "Let's imagine that you're walking down the street, your battery is dead in your car, and you have to go, find a phone. Your phone's dead, and two guys approach you from behind, and you decide, I'm going to get the heck out of it, and you run like crazy. You see a quarter mile down the way, you see a light, looks like there's a store opening. That's your destination. You get there, the door's locked, you turn around, you realize you have to fight these guys. Okay. Are you tired? Heck yeah, you're tired. But guess what? They are too, and you've been there before in training. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like you've been there. So the only way to really experience fighting fatigued is fighting fatigued, right? Or training fatigued, and how important it is to kind of make peace. As I think Hicks and Gracie's attribute was saying, get comfortable being uncomfortable. And that's what I think hard training does. It makes you learn how to relax under pressure and learn how to deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, and the gas tank, like no people, I'm strong enough, or I'm technical enough, or I'm fast enough. But once your gas tank is empty, like you could have the nicest Ferrari in the world, but once the gas tank's empty, it's completely useless. Your skill doesn't matter. And jujitsu guys that say, I'll roll my way into shape. That's physically impossible. Because if you roll that hard, because you have to get your heart rate up really hard in the anaerobic,
Right.
you have to have lactate right here. I mean, you have to be anaerobic. And if you push that hard in rolling, you're going to be always injured because
Right.
just like if you spar your way into shape, like a lot of fighters you go, I just spar my way into shape. You're gonna have concussions every other day because if you go as hard as you do sparring, like you do in a real fight, because you're going to spar. You got to remember, you're going to spar like 500 times for every one fight you have. So that's 500 times you're going to get, in a fight. You're going to be slurring and drooling before you're 30. So you can't fight your way into shape and you can't roll yourself into shape. You have to do things that don't get you hurt, like burpees or 8 counts or sprinting or something like that. Then you can simulate a fight,
Right.
but you can't do that. You can't punch, kick, or roll your way into shape. There has to be more to it, and you have to be you have to think a lot when to do that. You have to be creative to do that. And I think
Right.
that's one of the things we've been able to do pretty well. And because my fighters, I've never had a fighter lose by conditioning. I've seen a lot of fighters lose, like winning the first round, then they start losing. I've never had a fighter. I'm not bragging about it. I'm proud of it, and I think it has to do a lot with the way we train them. And I've never had this one. This was completely has nothing to do with that. But I've never had a fighter lose a fight on leg kicks. Leg kicks or conditioning, because leg kicks, to me, leg kicks are just drill. Yet it's something boring, but it's one of these volume things that you
You
have to
just gotta
do that
you
are
just gotta
so
rep.
boring, but you have to put in the volume, just like a pitcher. A pitcher throws the ball over and over and over and over. It looks so monotonous, but that's why they have a 100 whatever mile pitch, right?
Right, because they
I think.
perfected that. So I have to ask you a question. So I remember when I been visiting your
I'm not
school.
gay. Are you
What?
asking? Are you going to ask me? I'm gay? Everybody always asks me if I'm really gay. No, I'm
That,
not
that
gay. I'm
wasn't
married.
that wasn't what I was going to ask you. But thanks for clarifying that, just in case. And that was is that when I was at your school, you had all these medicine balls, and you had 100-pound medicine ball. I couldn't even pick the dang thing up. Has anybody ever done a workout with that thing?
Yeah, yeah. I have a 185 or two, but um, yeah, the 100 pounder we use for just show. It's like more of an explosive. We do 20 pound too, but
Right, I do a
just to
pen.
do the 100 pounder to just throw it against a big. It was into the ground, a big stake in the ground. So it was a workout we did. Same with the wheelbarrows. It's just something that we kind of caught on to doing, and we just were known for doing that. But that we do pick up that, and you just throw it
Yeah.
against something, not to a partner.
Yeah, it's funny because it's one of my workouts I do a couple times a week is a medicine ball, and I use a 25 pounder and I throw it against the wall and I pick it up and I do all these different tosses. And I remember I was thinking about this because yesterday it was my medicine ball workout, and I was thinking, I remember being at the pit, man, and they had 100 pound. What the heck would you do with that? Well,
It's a really good one. Medicine ball sprawls, and that's a great workout. It's a great testing. It's one of our tests. How many medicine ball sprawls can you do in 7 minutes? And it has to, you throw it up 10 feet and it has to touch
right,
the wall like a wall ball
right,
and
like a wall, and then you
cross it.
sprawl. Okay.
And then as soon as it hits the ground, you do a sprawl with it, then pick it up and do it again and try to do as many you can in
I
7 minutes.
I
It's a great
hate that
workout.
I hate that you shared that with me because now I have to friggin' do it the next time. I got to try it. I
A
just you're
great
talking
one.
about burpees. My favorite workout, yeah, I think like as hard as anything is I call them monster makers. Is it's a burpee under a pull-up bar. So
Yeah.
you do a burpee into a pull-up, burpee into it friggin' kicks your butt. It's like I can hardly if I get 10, I'm a happy camper. And it's like
Yeah.
I try to avoid doing them because they're so painful, but uh, definitely a good test of your character.
And I know, and it bugs me that guys our age are doing it when we're doing these things, and some guys come to me and they like, oh yeah, 40-year-olds, and they yeah, I got this hurt and this hurt,
Yeah.
man, I just overdid my body. I worked too hard and I trained too hard. And I used to play football, and it's like, we've had like 300 fights. I mean, and you played what, touch football when you were six? What this is it, it boggles my mind how people have been in so many fights like we have, and we're our age, and these guys are like 40. Oh, I've had a really tough life. No, you've had a soft life. There's a big difference. Don't say that to your students. They get all butthurt.
Yeah, well, my kind of thing, what I try to look at as I'm aging, and I want to be respectful of your time, so we're going to wrap pretty soon here, but I'd love to have you on again, is that I look at it at health, fitness, martial arts. If I want to keep training,
Okay.
right, first thing I do is understand that my limitations, like I can't kick like I could 30 years ago, and it is what it is. I'm still happy to be on the mat, but I try
Yeah.
to look at my overall health as part of my martial arts, and then that's first, right, and then fitness second, and then if I do that, then I'm still going to be able to train as I age. But if I put martial arts first, and you know what I mean by that, it's kind of like that would be training injured or kicking for fitness, and we know how bad that is on the joints if you're going to try to get
Yeah.
in shape by kicking. That seems to be kind of my, it's helped me dramatically. What advice would you give an aging martial arts for them to be able to continue to be on the mat?
Wow. That's a good. Okay, here's one. Overdo your warm up.
Oh, I love
Like
it. I love it. I love it.
like
That's such good
we warm
advice.
up, and because so many people get, oh, I just pulled this, I pulled that. You pull so much less things when you warm up. We do a mandatory 15-minute warm up before every class. And people that say, well, in the street, you're not gonna warm up. No, but you're fighting for your life in the street. You're okay pulling a muscle. You
Yeah.
don't want to do it while you're training.
Yeah. I love that. It's great, man. Well, hey, sir, I appreciate your time, man. It's been great. I want to get you on the show again. If someone wanted to know more, I know you have some products out there that are available. I know you have some online
Yeah.
training. Where would I go if I wanted to learn more about how to train with you?
Pit.tv, and then you go to the Pit Online Dojo. You can get there from the Pit.tv.
The pit.tv. All right, TV. All right, thanks,
Like
man.
television.
Always a pleasure. We got to stay
Good
in
seeing.
contact more often. Best
All
to
right.
you. All right, take
Thank you,
care.
brother. I'll see
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you for tuning in today to our podcast. I hope you found it valuable and inspirational. To stay connected, please subscribe to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you go for your podcasts. If you enjoyed today's show, please give us a 5-star review. And we really sincerely would appreciate some feedback. Your feedback helps us to create high quality content that will help others in the future. If you'd like to follow me, you can go to Dave Kovar on Facebook or Haunchi Dave Kovar on Instagram. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on next episode.